Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the first of our life stories for our Library of Lived Experience. Today I'm speaking with Samantha Loney. Samantha is the host and producer of Travelling Metis podcast, and she is also a member of the council at the Barrie South Simcoe Metis Council. So thank you for agreeing to be a part of this series, Samantha. I'm really looking forward to hearing about your life story and the experiences that have shaped you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always think it's important to share our stories. We can learn something from everyone, so it's great to be here.
Yeah, so just from the work that I've done and just from my own life experience, I know that there's experiences that shape each of us. Like, we go through different experiences in our life, and those are experiences that live with us and they shape who we are as a person. So I just thought maybe that's a good place to start, is sharing some of your life experiences that you feel have shaped who you are and how you interact with the world.
Yeah, for sure. So I always think of that question of what shaped you? And I think we don't really know until later on in our lives the things that have impacted us as kids. I know I grew up with, my mom has diabetes, and her diabetes was unchecked because we grew up in government housing. We didn't have a lot of money. She was a single mom raising two girls. So I think seeing my mom kind of go through the struggles in the healthcare system and just being a diabetic, always visiting her in the hospital, I didn't really realize how that was affecting me until I was later in life. And yeah, I think just witnessing that and having I have two older sisters who I feel like I haven't gone through a lot of traumatic experiences because I've had two older sisters, being the youngest, having people always taking care of me. But I think, one thing that's definitely shaped my life is my mom's diabetes. And I think anyone having a family member who's sick, especially in your childhood years, they're not able to properly care for you because they're trying to take care of themselves, right? And I think I know you do a lot of work in these government systems and how we can make it better for people. And I think because my mom was like a single mother and we were on government housing, she couldn't go on disability and couldn't do the things that would make her be well as a person because she had two kids to take care of, right? So I think looking back, having that experience of navigating those government systems and seeing that it's not designed well for people with disabilities and health issues really shaped me into wanting to do things that are always just making the world better for people, right? Because I think once you've been in those systems and you know that the government isn't really designed to help people, it just, shapes you as a person.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. So like you said, you didn't really, realize, sometimes we don't realize till years later how experience have impacted and shaped our lives. So is there anything you can share about those younger years with your mom, watching her go through those health struggles as a child that you feel like would benefit people now to that are going through health issues now and they have children, or that they should be mindful of? Or
I think, and obviously most mothers, the instinct is to put other people first and things like that. But I think because my mom was thinking of my sister and I, we would go to food banks and she'd always make sure we had meals and we were eating. But with anybody who knows anything about diabetes, you have to be on a strict regimen of when you eat your meals, how healthy you're eating. So she wasn't able to take care of herself in that way. I think she always just put us first. And I think, as a lot of people know, self-care and taking care of yourself, if you're not healthy, you're not able to be there for others, right? So I think since my mom wasn't able to care for herself properly, she was in the hospital and things like that. And I know it's put a lot of stress on my older sister who had to take care of me. So I think for a lot of mothers, maybe the instinct is to put your kids first and take care of them. But I think if you don't take care of your health, you can't really be there for your kids, right? She was hospitalized because she wasn't taking care of herself because of her diabetes, right? So I think We often, and maybe this is like a female thing too, our natural instinct is to care for others, but if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't really be there for the people in our lives.
And I think that's a great lesson for people that are natural born nurturers and stuff like that, to learn that self-care is not selfish. It's important. And it's because we can't care for other people if we're not properly caring for ourselves. And it's a great example for us to set for the women that come after us, right? That self-care is okay, and it doesn't mean that you're selfish, because you need to take care of yourself so that you're 100% the best person that you can be to care for your children, your grandchildren, all the other people in your life. So I think that that's a struggle for a lot of women. I know for myself personally, but I have, like, at this stage in my life, really been prioritizing self-care because I realize that it's important for myself, for my own, like, mental, physical, and spiritual health. And it's also an important example that I can give to my daughters and to my granddaughters that, you know, it's okay to take care of yourself. So I think that's a great lesson to learn. One of the things I was wondering too, like when you have a parent that you said your mom's a single mom, had, you know, taking care of, you know, several children, and then struggling with her own health issues. Were there other people, like, you know, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Were there other people that were a part of your childhood that impacted your experiences and your life story that were there to help?
I think honestly, like my mom did have like a best friend that would like babysit us and things like that. But I think another lesson for people is my mom's very stubborn and would try to do everything by herself. My mom's not the type of person to ask for help. So I think that was kind of a struggle. And I think that's another life lesson I learned, is seeing her struggle growing up and looking back. And it's like, oh, if you would have just asked for help, right? And let people know that you're struggling. I think a lot of people get embarrassed if they don't have a lot of money, or if they're going through personal things that maybe they don't want to share with others. But I think for me, I was always like guarded as a child too. I think being raised by her, but as I grew up and learned more of like, hey, like it does take a village. We're all in this together. It's about community, right? I think my mom, because she grew up in like a house with like 10 kids, a house of like domestic violence, like her father was an alcoholic. I think she was used to not being able to ask for help for things, right? So I think that kind of growing up in that large family with that violence happening, it was like, oh, no one's going to help me anyway, right? So I think the more I learned and talked to my mom, again, as you age, you kind of get more comfortable realizing, hey, like, why am I like this? What happened in the last generation, right? Like, we're thinking past generations so we can make the next one better, right? So I think, yeah, just sitting down and as an adult and talking to my mom about certain things, it's like, oh, that's why we struggled a bit more, right? But in the same way, my mom, I don't really understand it, like why she was so unable to ask for help, because she gives back so much to her community. Like, she volunteers whenever she can. Like, that's a big thing she instilled in us, was like, no matter how much you're struggling, you could always give back. So like, to me, it was like kind of I can give help, but I can't ask for help type of thing, which I think a lot of people do struggle with, is asking for help, right? Not realizing your life is going to be a lot easier if you just ask for help.
Mm-hmm. And that is so true for so many people, right? And especially past generations, right? Where you're not supposed to ask for help. You're supposed to just, like, you know, just go through life and just, you know, deal with whatever life throws at you, and act strong and not let anybody know when you're struggling. You have to put on this face, right? Because we didn't say, it wasn't okay for us to say, hey, I'm not okay and I need some help here, right? And so I think that that's an important thing, and this is part of why we're doing this Life Stories series, and you know, the Library of Lived Experiences, so that generations that come afterwards can learn from, you know, the wisdom of previous generations, but also from the mistakes, because we're all, you know, human, and we all, you know, take from our parents, you know, their wisdom and their strengths, but there's also trauma that they've dealt with that was passed down from generations before, right? And I think people are just learning to, confront those past traumas and learn how to deal with them and maybe move forward and try to break some of those cycles, right? And so I think asking for help is huge for a lot of people. It's something that people were not comfortable with and didn't really have permission to do, right? But it is okay. And, like when you're able to, reach out to somebody, it's not just going to benefit you, it's going to benefit them too, right? Because sometimes people want to give back to you, right? And even they feel it builds the strength of the community, right? Like there's a saying that I like. It's like it's in the shelter of each other that people live, right? And that's an Irish proverb, and I think that's so important. Like we don't live in isolation; we live in families and communities, and we're all supposed to be there to help each other.
Yeah, and giving back, an elder told me, giving back is medicine, right? Like you said, it makes you feel good, it boosts your confidence. So you're actually giving to someone by letting them help you, right? You're helping them as well as them helping you, because you do feel good when you help people as well.
For sure. Like even if you don't have a lot to give, right? Like you just knowing that somebody asked, for like a cup of sugar or something like that. There's that story that I love about the cup of sugar, right? Like in borrowing just a cup of sugar from a neighbor, it might not seem like that much, but it makes them feel like, well, I don't have a lot to give, but I can give this to my neighbor, right? Or just the passing down, because we grew up in government housing too with a single mom, and the passing down of clothes, right? Like neighbors would be like, oh, that might fit that, neighbor's child or stuff like that. And just the way that they all cared for each other without even having to ask. I thought it was really beautiful. And I think that's something that's kind of missing in today's, like we live in these nice little suburban neighborhoods where people don't really have that community because everyone drives and commutes to work and back and stuff like that. And then they go in their house and they close their door. And I think that people are feeling the lack of community.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my great aunt talks about they lived in like a farming community just outside of like Espanola, and they would go to each farm and everybody had a job and you would help each other on like each person's farm, right? So you just travel from, she always talks about she used to make ice cream for like them because it would be hot in the summer, and you would just go with your family, like each family would travel to everybody's farm and you'd help each other. And it was that sense of community that unfortunately, like you said, we've kind of lost. It's everybody for themselves. We're all struggling to survive, not realizing, hey, like maybe the better solution is to actually help each other instead of being isolated. And
So maybe can you share some of your lived experience with your sisters? I know that you've talked about them a lot and like that they're an important part of your life. So having two older sisters, what were their lessons that they passed down to you or that you learned from them?
Yeah, I always joke that I learned what not to do having two older sisters, especially with my oldest sister. But so I have two older sisters. One's 4 years older, and then I have a 13-year older sister. Yeah, that's a huge gap from my dad had a baby with another woman before me and my sister came along. So a half sister, I guess. But so I have the two older sisters, and I feel, I talked a lot about like my mom being sick and things like that. So with my oldest sister, she was kind of, I guess, like a second mother to me, just because she had to be, right? Like she took on that. So I feel like it sheltered me from a lot of things, which is like maybe a good thing, because there's a lot of bad things that were happening at home that like my sister kind of talks about that I had no idea were going on, right? Because I'm the youngest, I'm being protected and things like that. But my oldest sister, had some trouble with drug abuse and things like that. She's sober now. She has been sober for, I don't know, since my nephew was born, and he's like 16. So she's been through a lot of that. But again, she also grew up with her single mother. She grew up in Northern Ontario. We lived kind of down south in Barrie. So she didn't grow up with my dad, so she didn't have that other parent there as well. But I think, yeah, just visiting her. I used to like idolize her, but that's the thing too of like you learn like people. Another life lesson is like people can live multiple lives. Like for me, I had no idea she was dealing with drug abuse and things like that, right? I just thought she was my cool older sister. And same with, I talked about my grandfather being an alcoholic. Like he was sober by the time us grandkids came around. So it's, my mom talks about it, I'm like, oh, like I had no idea that had happened. Like you never would have known by interacting, right? So I think that's another life lesson I kind of learned is like people are they can grow and you change throughout your life, right? Like you're never stagnant in one thing that you are. Because like I said, I've had interactions with like family members and then hearing a story of, oh, I had no idea that happened to you or things like that, right? Because they seem like they're all put together and all okay when you're interacting with them. So yeah, that's another life lesson. Is not everybody is what they seem, right? Like there's a whole history and a whole, like we're doing this, right? There's a whole story to people's lives that you're just getting a page or a chapter out of.
Yeah, I think that's a great lesson for people to learn, is that people are, they contain multiple, experiences that shape who they are, and they grow as a person, right? So to like, you maybe, know somebody from like when they were 20 years old, and then you cross paths again when they're 50. They're a totally different person. Like they've had so many experiences. Maybe they've gone through marriage and a marriage breakup, and like being a parent, and maybe they struggled with addiction or mental health issues, or the loss of someone that they really cared about, and like that all shapes you and who you are as a person, right? So what I was thinking when you were talking was about the being sheltered, like your sister kind of tried to shelter you from some of the trauma that was going on in your family, and I think that that's common, that people, that will try to protect, children and stuff like that, and not want them to see stuff like that, and sometimes that is great that they've been sheltered from that part, but sometimes people, it makes them not understand people in their family as well as they could, because they don't know about like what that person previously went through, right? So were there any like things that later in life that you learned about your family that kind of made you understand people in your family and maybe have more empathy for them and be like, oh, that's why, that makes sense now that they went through this trauma, right? And that kind of impacted how they interact in the world.
Yeah, so there's a couple people in my family that I kind of think of, like for my grandfather, like I said, he was an alcoholic, and not to excuse anyone who, like, violence is, obviously domestic violence is horrible, but like learning about his childhood. So when he grew up, his mother died when he was younger, and he had brothers, and their father put them in an orphanage because he was in the military, and he saw his brother almost get beaten to death, like whipped with like chains in the orphanage and things like that. So to learn that about him, like not to excuse how he behaved, but I think, as we were saying, people live multiple lives, right? It's like there was that trauma from his childhood that he kind of either couldn't let go of, didn't get help because, like we said, people bury stuff back then where it's like, oh, don't talk about that. Like that happens to everybody, right? So I think him not dealing with that kind of propelled him. And I know my mom tells this story of my grandfather when they were probably, I think, like into adulthood. Before he went and got sober, he was just crying, and how much he like ruined his family because he regretted how he had behaved, and he was an alcoholic and violent with my grandmother and my aunts and uncles, and he completely regretted it. But they all saw him as this horrible person, right? And it's, I think, even them, until they learned what happened to him when he was a kid, again, doesn't excuse how he was behaving, but I think you learn that there's a real person behind this, right? And they've been through trauma, and there's a way that there's a reason they're acting the way that they're acting, right? So I think the more we learn about people, the more, again, empathy we can have. And again, if he had gotten help sooner, who knows how he would have grown. Like, he might not have been an alcoholic. He might not have done that to his family, right? So I think that's kind of the reason why we need to share stories, because it's like if he would have gotten help and talked about what had happened to him, right, his whole life would have changed. Again, by the time I had grown up with him, he was my grandfather. He was kind of quiet and like reserved, but I had no idea growing up as a child until I was later into an adult when my mom told me like his story and things like that. So I think, again, realizing everybody has that story of, obviously that person's been through something. When he was a kid, like he was abused when he was a child, right? So it's like kids can't really protect themselves. So I think, just learning all of that. And I think that's why it's important for anytime I get to sit down with an elder in my family or something like that, like to learn their story, because I think you can, as we were talking about, the previous generation kind of shapes who you are. So if you can understand what's happened previously in your family, I talked a lot about like my mom instilled in us always wanting to give back. And I found out that, so one of my, her father wasn't Métis, but her mother was. And on her mother's side, I have a great-grandfather who was murdered for giving back to a family. There was a family who was abandoned in the woods, and he was harvesting and going to give them food, and then someone came along and murdered him. And so I think that kind of instilled in our family that, you know, we've had someone murdered for giving back and helping people, right? To sort of honor that person. It's just, no matter what you have, you always give back, right? Yeah. So I think like when I learned that, I was like, oh, that's why that's so important to our family, to help people no matter how much we're struggling, is because we've had like a family member murdered for doing that, right? And it's, you don't want that person's life to go to waste for helping someone, right? So to
and thank you for sharing that. And that's a traumatic experience that shaped your family, not just you, but generations of your family, and probably will carry on through your family. And we don't really, really stop and think about like how something that happened 100 years ago affects somebody today, right? But those lessons that are passed down, and like what you were saying, like from that horrible situation, value, like family value to give back, was instilled in generations going forward. It could have had the opposite effect, where they could have said, well, he was trying to do good and this is the result of it, and so we just put a box around ourselves and we don't try to reach out to other people, right? And I think that there's people that probably have had experiences where someone tried to do good and it resulted in a tragedy, and they've had the other way, right? And maybe it wasn't in your generation, but it was generations past, and you don't even know what your family's values are, right? So that's why the importance of sharing our life stories and making this library of lived experiences, I think, is so important, is because we need to share those life lessons that get passed down through the generations, and like previous generations weren't so great at sharing their stories so much, maybe the good stories, but like there were stories that were hidden because it was like, those are not things you talk about. And that left a lot of unresolved trauma, right? And I think, it's kind of fallen on our generation and it will fall even more on the next generation to, heal those, traumas that have been carried through families for so long. And so, I think I just really thank you for sharing some of that with us. And is there any other people that have impacted your life, not like, blood relatives, but like you're part of the Métis community and stuff like that, the elders that have shared their wisdom and stuff like that with you?
I think my Métis council in general just has given back. The reason I became a councillor was to repay what they gave to me. They'd always, President Roxanne Shank and the chair of our council, Tony Muscat, really supported me doing my podcast and everything, actually. I've been doing anytime I needed support when I wasn't on council, they always said, like, we'll write you a letter of recommendation. You want to use the office? You want to do this? Like, they were always there to give back. And that's pretty much the only reason I joined council. Like, it's kind of like, I'm not really well, I guess like everything when you're Indigenous or just living in now in these times, you're political, but I wasn't like ever wanting to join in like any politics or anything like that. But I saw it as a way to give back, and knowing that the council at that local level, because you do have like the tiers of government in Métis government, but at that council level, just seeing how much the Barrie South Simcoe Council was giving back to the community, I wanted to repay what was given to me. And again, that's a big value in my family, is just finding where you can give back and contribute to making community better. So that was a big reason I became a counselor, and they've impacted my life so much. But even like in doing film and things like that, like I have Loretta Todd is a Métis filmmaker, and she's done so much for Métis people, and I was part of one of her programs in the IM4 lab, which is, it teaches like virtual storytelling to Indigenous people. And I've had so many other, not just Métis, but like Indigenous people give back to me and kind of share their knowledge and enhance my like storytelling career and things like that. And a lot of programs they offer are free programs, which is when I started my Métis and Me program, like every podcast program that I do, I try to make it free, because I know I've had free programs that have taught me things. So anything to like mitigate a cost for someone to be able to get like that podcasting knowledge, because again, like we're doing right now, the podcasting was a way for me to give back to community for Métis people who are kind of spread out. So I think just teaching other people how to share their stories and that their voice matters was important to me. And I've had so many, like I said, Loretta Todd, Doreen Manuel is a First Nations filmmaker that's given back to me too. And just, the importance of, I think, telling our stories, because it's healing for other people to get to hear our stories, but it's also healing for ourselves. Like I said, everything I've learned about my family, just having them share the stories with me of people, like you said, that maybe a story from 100 years ago or maybe from 20 years ago, the more you learn about yourself and you see the problems that other people have gone through, kind of makes your life easier because you're like, oh, like that's why I am the way I am, or oh, like they had it so hard. Like I may be having some hard times right now, but 100 years ago, for like I said, like I had a family member murdered, right? So it's like you learn and heal from storytelling, and hearing people's stories can give you something to relate to, and sharing your story, like you said, to get it off your chest, so it's not eating away at you, right? Like I mentioned with my grandfather, if he would have just maybe been able to express what had happened to him at a young age, maybe his life would have been completely different, right? So I think just I forget what I think the question was, talk about a person, but anybody who's helped me with storytelling, and
I'm huge, again, for storytelling as well. I think it's so important for us to tell our stories and to tell them honestly and openly and bravely. And that's been one of the most freeing things that I have done. I was like silent about my own struggles and stuff like that. And it was only after two of my daughters had friends that passed by suicide within weeks of each other that I finally publicly shared about my own struggles with mental health and depression. And that was so freeing. I was so scared about the stigma and judgment that was going to come on me, but like had so many people reach out to me and thank me for sharing my story, and they said they felt less alone. And so for me, that's really something that I think we underestimate with when we share our stories, is how it's going to affect other people, how it's going to make them feel like not alone, make them feel a part of a community, and that there are people out there that understand them, and it also gives them the maybe the courage to share their story, right? So the more of us that share our stories, we're allowing other people to feel like it's okay, I could do this, and I can still carry on, and I can still go out in the community and show my face and not have to be embarrassed that I was vulnerable with people and stuff like that.
I was gonna say that, like the power of vulnerability, right? And again, like we were talking about, is like realizing you can't do everything by yourself. Yeah. You do need other people. And unfortunately, the way the world has been evolving is we've been letting community kind of slide. Like it's all, I think under capitalism, like community doesn't work, right? Yeah. Like you got to strive to get to the top by yourself and things like that. But I think, just being vulnerable I've learned that like, again, like going back to my grandfather, if he would have been vulnerable and just said like, hey, like this is harming me. And again, like anybody who has like a drug addiction, you're doing that to cover up something, right? So it's, if only someone had like, said, hey, like I see you're struggling, like, why don't you share your story and tell me about your life, right? But instead it's like you do drugs to sort of cover up what's really bothering you, whether you have like a mental health issue. And actually, I think all drug addiction probably goes down to you're covering and self-medicating, right? So I think, if people just knew like it's okay to be vulnerable with people and share your story and
So I think, it's not just about having the courage to share your story, it's about having that platform to share your story in so that it reaches people. So that's why like your podcast is so wonderful, and like this is the importance of our Library of Lived Experience, is that we want to get people's stories out there so that people can listen to different stories, because like my story may impact somebody and your story will impact somebody totally different, right? But everybody has different life experiences, so we want to get a variety of different stories out there so that people can hear the ones that are maybe going to impact them and make them feel not so alone in the world, but then also to hear stories that they never would have heard, because this person's life experience is totally different from the life that they've lived, and they're like, wow, I can't even believe somebody went through that. Because then it opens us up to understanding other human beings and being not afraid of each other or having so much stigma and judgment against people that are different than us. So I think that's also an important part of the storytelling and sharing our stories. And I was just wondering, because you are so involved in the Métis community, was there any certain teachings from the Métis that you feel would be useful that you want to share with people, or are there rituals and ceremonies that have given you strength and that you incorporate into your life that you want to share with people?
I smudge every morning, kind of just to invite my ancestors. I feel like I'm very spiritual. So I smudge every morning and just invite my ancestors to kind of, not like surrendering over to them, but just saying like, hey, like I know you're always with me and I'm going to be guided to wherever, whether it be like a bad situation that's going to teach me something, but also that comfort in knowing that, even bad things that happen to you are shaping you, and things like that. I think for me, for my family, my mom, again, that community of coming together, the music has kind of, I like can't play an instrument to save my life, but for my mom's family, like all the men in her family play like the fiddle, and that's a big instrument in Métis culture, and just the kitchen parties of them coming together and listening to music. I think music's been a big part of my life, and just to like escape, I guess, is another thing that like music just allows me to do. And I think I never realized like, oh, like I'll put on headphones like all day and like blare my music too loud, and I'm like, why do I have this connection to music? But like there's so many musicians in my mom's family, and I think, again, thinking back to like learning stories from and listening to elders in your family and being like, oh, like maybe that's why I like that so much, because music was a big part of my family's life and that connection to culture. I think Métis people are like, every story, again, of my one of my great-grandfathers being murdered for harvesting and feeding that family. You look at the story of Louis Riel too, was hung. I think just that stubbornness of Métis people, of rebelling and always trying to do what's right. You saw me at the Bursey encampment, like just saying, hey, I'm gonna be here and I'm just gonna watch, like to make sure you guys are treating these people okay, right? I think for me, being Métis is always, and I ask on the podcast, like, oh, like, what does being Métis mean to people and stuff? And to me, it's like that kind of, we rebelled against the government. And I think that's always kind of been in me with my life experiences too, is like, hey, like maybe like the government needs to be challenged. And even within my own Métis government, I always criticize and question, you know, if what we're doing is right. And I think that's a big part of something that's bred into Métis people, because during, you know, like the fur trade with the Hudson's Bay and the Northwest Company, it was a lot of Métis people said, hey, like, I don't want to be tied to anything. I want to be free, right? So I think that pursuit of freedom is kind of what's like deeply been instilled in me, and just doing what's right. The government, like, despite what the government is telling you what's right, I think that's kind of been something that's passed down to me. And my mom's like a big supporter of that too, of just, you know, like helping people, not like the government doesn't know what's best for you. The community knows what's best for it, right? And so always giving back. And I think that's just, a big part of being Métis is just we rebelled against the government, and where I think that's just going to be instilled in every Métis person until I say until there's no more Métis people, but our infinity flag means that Métis people go on forever, right? Even that, because for a lot of Indigenous people, like blood quantum and the Indian Act defines them, right? Where Métis people stood up and said, like, actually, that doesn't define me. I'm gonna define myself. And I think that's maybe hurt Métis people a little bit, because right now we're navigating that. But I think just, we've always been a people that have rebelled against the government and said, I'm gonna decide what's best for me. And that's kind of, I guess, a value that's been instilled in me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of the experiences that have shaped you and who you are as a person. I've enjoyed talking to you. Is there any final thought that you want to share?
I think, just a lot of older people are dying. So I always encourage, I didn't grow up with my grandmother. She died the day before my first birthday, so I didn't get to ask her questions. And I think that's a lot of people sort of don't realize, that these people who are older and in your life and have these stories that we can learn from aren't going to be around forever. So anytime I get to talk to my great aunt's the only one left in her family, she's 84. So I'm always asking her questions. And sometimes elders say, oh, I don't really remember, or they think certain things aren't significant. But I think once you start talking to your elders, and they'll start to open up, and they'll say things that they didn't even know were significant and important. Like my great aunt talks about Sunday mornings, her mom would make bannock, and because her mom was, her dad wasn't Métis, but her mother was, and her mother used to speak Michif only with her cousins and only do cultural things with her family when her family would come and visit. But my great aunt, shares stories all the time, and says oh, I didn't really grow up with our culture. And when little snippets come out, I'm like, that is part of our culture, right? So I think elders who have stories, and they don't think they have stories, but a lot of them do. And I think you can, I know not a lot of people like to just sit there and listen, but I'll listen to people all day. So I think, I would leave with just talk to your community members and get stories from them.
I think that's so important. I think that's great advice, is talk to your elders and get their stories before they can't tell them anymore, right? Because their stories are part of your story, right? And if you can understand what shaped their life, you're going to understand better what has helped to shape yours. So thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.